Lex. You're going to bring me down.
That's what the truth does sometimes.
It is true. It's true. Well, the reason I was late, so I apologize. I was late, but there's a report unconfirmed, but that, and I'm sure it's false. I even put that in the tweet when I posted, but it said that there's early reports that Iran launched a missile towards Beirut in retaliation to the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador. I highly doubt that's true. I just think that would be very foolish by the regime because, they're striking everybody then. But it just kind of caught me by surprise. Unconfirmed, just to be clear. Probably we'll get a confirmation whether it's true or not. The missile should land by the time, during our interview, we'll know.
Okay.
But, Colonel, it's been a while. It's been a few days we haven't spoken. And I think yesterday, how we joked a few days ago, we're like, every time we come on, there's bad news. And it keeps getting worse and worse. And, I made a kind of quick joke. Hopefully we'll have an interview where there'll be at least some, at least indication of something positive, if not something positive. And I think yesterday was part of that. Now, obviously, as the optimist, I saw it as very good news, potentially very good news, while still being pragmatic about it. But I'd love to get your original thoughts because there's conflicting messages. The US says, and according to many reports, they're talking to the Speaker of the Parliament. And Trump said, they're very extensive, deep discussions. He made those remarks before the markets opened, obviously. And Iran immediately said, no, there's no discussions. My position is there are discussions, but it doesn't mean they're progressing as well as Trump made it out to be. And at the same time, Trump is sending more troops. They're still heading to the region. So what's your sense of it, of what we've seen yesterday and today and all the reports that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be sober-minded about this and just look at what is the track record. I mean, you can go back to last year when we attacked the first time when we were in the middle of negotiations. We did the same thing again this time after the third round of negotiations. And now, Trump gives this ultimatum the day after he says that Iran is all but defeated. There's just a little clog in the Strait of Hormuz, no big deal, but we're not going to mess with it because we don't need to. The Europeans are going to. And then all of a sudden there's this big, 48-hour death and destruction kind of ultimatum. And then, okay, well, actually, there's not. You know what? I'm going to give you another 5 days. And actually, we're talking to people, and now it's we're saying that the Iranians they're kind of confused. They don't really know who's in charge. And by the way, according to Politico, we're trying to vet some other people, like the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. Maybe we'll let him be the leader. These things are just so detached from reality. It's just hard to imagine because it's like we want to listen to everything Donald Trump says and anything that come from the Western world. And we want to say everything that the Iranians are saying on the other hand. Well, that's untrue. So they're definitely, talking. Whatever Trump says is true and whatever the Iranian says is untrue. And you just got to look at just the logic of it. Why would Iran, after having made incredible offer on the 26th and 27th of February that should have forestalled any kind of a war. There shouldn't have been one. They were offering things, no enrichment, and put on the table even the long-range drones and their support to their regional proxies. Golden platter for a diplomatic solution. Trump would have been, hugely lauded in the United States and elsewhere of having actually accomplished something better than the Obama deal, et cetera. He threw that away. And then after you've killed their supreme leader, after you've destroyed all kinds of their naval craft and aircraft, killed thousands of their people, now all of a sudden they're going to want to go back and do that again when they clearly have the capacity to draw this out for a long time. Drawing this war out for a long time gives all the advantages to the Iranian side, and every day that goes by with the oil prices even remotely high goes against the United States because we can't go a long time, but it seems like the Iranians can. And why would we think that after barely 4 weeks or not even 4 weeks that they're going to get tired of this and that the price is going to be too high when they have shown that they can suffer hundreds of thousands of killed in the Iran-Iraq war? All the sanctions that we put on them, the war from last year, all the things that have happened in between with the assassination of leaders, the assassination of scientists, et cetera, that now after 4 weeks, they're going to come hat in hand. It just doesn't pass the common sense test to me. And when you have the Iranian side saying, no, we're not. In fact, what indirect conversations that they do acknowledge are happening, the terms that they're offering are rather different than the ones that President Trump is saying, which is this either 6 or 15 point, depending on which day you're talking to President Trump, that they're agreeing to. And of course, the issue is the main one is no nuclear weapons, et cetera. And why would Iran then say, yes, we'll just capitulate to what you want because of 4 weeks and no guarantees of anything for us. We lose everything. I mean, there's no reason for them to accept this. It would be suicidal for them to do so. So I don't think that that's true. I think if anything, they're saying we're going to continue to strike you. We're going to continue to respond to what the things you're doing and drag this thing out, because once this 5 days expires, either you're going to make good, Trump is, on this, the delayed ultimatum, and you're going to hit the energy structure, and then they almost surely will do what they've said and strike back at the regional energy infrastructure, which will cause catastrophe. Or Trump won't do it, and they'll continue to they'll just continue the status quo with the strait only open to those that the Iranian side says can pass through it. And they're benefiting right now. The Iranian side is, they're selling more oil than they did before the war. They're selling it at a higher price. So there's no reason for them to go back on that right now, just because they're getting hit, with a bunch of stuff on the surface. And, relatively speaking, there's been, I think, somewhere around 2,000 casualties or something on the Iranian side. In a country of 93 million people, that's something that they can endure, I think, for a long time. So I'm not as optimistic. And of course, and I'm sure you'll want to bring this up anyway, the probability and the reporting is that maybe this whole 5-day thing was not for negotiations, but just like we've done in the past, to give you a precursor to get more combat power in the region so that we can try some sort of a ground operation. And there's any number of potentials that could be. I think it's the foolish to the highest order for us to even think about anything on the ground, but it looks like that we certainly do that. We're definitely building up ground combat power to do something in the region. Time will tell what that turns out to be.
Yeah, I'll read out that tweet that the team put out a few hours ago. Forget what Trump says. Watch what he does. He just sent some of America's most elite military units to the Middle East while talking about a possible peace deal. Night Stalkers fly special forces into enemy territory in complete darkness. Delta Force takes out high-value targets. Navy SEALs hit from the sea. Ranger sees airfields within hours. These are not defensive units. This is a surgical strike roster. So where are they headed? 3 targets make the most sense. The Strait of Hormuz, the various islands there, the Karg Island, and Iran's nuclear site. So the point they're making with this post is that, and as they say at the end, Trump didn't send diplomats. He sent the guys who specialize in hitting these 3 things. You do the math. So it kind of makes your point. Like, look, watch what he does. Now, I'll tell you my stance, and obviously I could be wrong again. I think, first, I think there are negotiations. There's reports, according to Idiot, not the best source, but Idiot says that the foreign minister of Iran confirmed that negotiations are ongoing. Now, negotiations doesn't mean there's going to be a deal reached. There could be a bluff again by the Americans. As you've said, these negotiations are a cover to first improve the markets, but also a cover for a ground operation, which is inevitable. Now, you ask a question, why would Iran capitulate with nothing in it for them? So there is something in it for Iran if the US accepts. So Iran's initial demands were lifting of the sanctions, American bases pull out from the region, and the last one was some sort of security guarantees. Exactly. The middle one is the problem. American bases pulling out of the region. Well, according to reports, this one, according to multiple reports last night, the new demands did not include that. So the other 2, security guarantees and the sanctions. I think the end reparations. So security guarantees, sanctions, and reparations. I think I'll get the first one, easy one out. Sanctions, I really think Trump would remove sanctions. I don't think he has an issue with having Iran's economy flourish as long as the new regime or new government is more open to doing business with the US, allows American companies more access to their oil, more access to the Strait of Hormuz, gives Trump more influence to the Strait. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying what would Trump accept? He's a businessman. So that's number one in terms of the sanctions. Number 2 is security guarantees. Now, this is a tough one because how can you offer security guarantees when you attacked them twice during negotiations? Who can guarantee the world's biggest military that decides which rules to follow and not to follow, depending on its interests, will guarantee that it won't attack you again? I think the best guarantee that Iran has, they already have it. They've proven it. This war has proven that Iran does not need nuclear weapons for security guarantees and does not need anyone's guarantees and does not need American bases out of the region because they've closed the Strait of Hormuz. They kept the Strait of Hormuz closed after thousands and thousands of targets have been hit, continue to get hit. And they've managed to continue attacking Gulf and Israeli countries, not only with drones, but with missiles, as well as cluster munitions, and cause significant damage. And they've managed to continue retaliating for tit for tat. So they've literally proven that, hey, we already have the deterrent. We don't need nuclear weapons. So that's why I think security guarantees would not be that difficult of an issue. And lastly, reparations. I think there's a way to come up with reparations that would not make it seem like the US is paying reparations. Could be labeled as investments or doing business that will include the US and other countries getting more business in the country. Iran can paint it as reparations, and Trump could paint it as, hey, we're getting good deals now with Iran with a more friendly government. Now, it all depends on whether the IRGC are going to accept any of this, because they're still the ones that have a chokehold on power. There's talks about potentially a power struggle in the country, possible. But I just think that the Supreme Leader and the IRGC still have control. But that's why I'm more optimistic, Colonel. But I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well,
Pop that bubble again.
Here's here's why I'm not. What you laid out there is logical. And if President Trump went after that, it would be rational, it would be logical, and it would potentially, we'll see how the IRGC and even the civilian government, we'll see how they'll react to this, because they've obviously been quite angered about how this stuff has gone on. But it's at least theoretically possible. Here's the problem, though. Two big ones. Number one, we had a deal already on the table before. If Trump's a businessman, he had a golden opportunity with what the Iranians were willing to offer without having to lose a single American or a single base or anything else. He could have had it, but he didn't. He chose not to. So I don't know why he would accept now what he wouldn't accept back then. And then the second thing, and probably the bigger one, Israel. Israel does not want a negotiated settlement. Israel wants the destruction of Iran above all. Even after Trump came out and said, put a pause on this ultimatum, we're going to put it out 5 days. Israel, Netanyahu specifically, reiterated after that notice came out that we will not stop until we have settled the situation here to where Iran knows it's on the bottom and we're on the top. We will continue fighting until then. And obviously, they're continuing on both in Lebanon and still stuff in the Gaza Strip, and obviously in Iran. So they're not stopping any of that. And it's clear that this has been driven by Israel from the beginning. It's laughable to suggest, which Netanyahu does, that, oh no, it's actually been Trump who's been the driver besides this. We're just helping our ally out here. He's the one that came into office saying he wants to. That's nonsense. Obviously, there's no American value whatsoever in going into a war unless someone else wanted us to go do it. So I doubt very seriously that Israel would allow that to happen. I just can't imagine them saying, yeah, after all this time, this once in a 50-year opportunity they were boasting ad nauseum before this thing came out. Naftali Bennett has been reiterating this just within the last few days. I just don't think they would allow President Trump to have such a negotiation because they don't want one. I think President Trump, for his part, is recognizing there is no military solution to this. This whole nonsense about all of these Delta forces and Rangers and everything else, the Marines, all this. Dude, this is a country 5 times bigger or 4 times bigger than Iraq. It's very mountainous, whole sections of the country, like the Afghanistan, where I served and saw firsthand on the ground exactly how militarily difficult it is to do anything in there. And then the idea that we're going to go in with a few thousand and accomplish anything at all of even operational, much less strategic advantage is just nonsense. You're not going to open the strait. Taking Karg Island doesn't give you anything except for casualties. It won't change the balance of power or dynamics. And if we do the third one, which has been rumored a lot, that all the thing about Karg and even those islands in the horseshoe of the strait are a deception operation, making people think that's where we're going, but we're really going after reprocessed facilities, and we're going to take away wherever those 400 kilograms are, and we're going to go seize them by force. That's nearly a suicide mission. But I'm sure Iran, number one, I doubt very seriously that they put all of it together in one spot, so it's a single point of failure. And wherever they have it, whether it is one or multiple, they definitely have it in a very defensible position that would be incredibly difficult to get after, which would mean a high casualty producing if you go in there to take it by force. This won't be Venezuela where you're going to snatch and grab Maduro when insiders help. So I think that everything we're trying to do, I think Trump recognizes militarily, there's no way to get this thing done. There's a reason why our Navy hasn't opened it so far. There's a reason why our allied navies, no one has offered to come in because they know that won't work. That'll just get your ship sent to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Nobody wants to do that. So Trump probably is in between a rock and a hard place, realizing he needs something like what you described. Whether Iran would accept it is a secondary issue, and I'm not sure that they would. I calculate that they would demand a lot in reparations and any kind of security guarantees or any kind of terms that President Trump will have a real hard time spinning into any kind of a domestic success and not look like he's weak. Because, man, on American airwaves in the last 24 hours, they have been doubling down on saying nothing but complete victory is ours. We're almost there. There's no way we're going to negotiate anything. They're negotiating for weakness. How's he going to suddenly turn around and say, but they can stay in power to the Iranian regime and they can get some money however you want to. It's just hard for me to see how he squares that circle. So I think that he is in a no-win situation in Iran. Israel will make sure he stays in that no-win situation. And as a result, this will continue to languish, in my view.
All right, I'm going to give you my thoughts on these points, and I'm going to give you a quick update. So the missile that was launched to Lebanon, it seems they haven't received any information on that, but it seems that it's not the case. I haven't received any details of any impact in Lebanon. So that's good news there, because I was really worried about it. Now, on the points you've made, on the first point, Trump had a great deal before the war. So I think it was a great deal if it's about nuclear weapons. Okay, but I don't think it is. I think it's about having more control of the Strait of Hormuz and a government more willing to work with the US and change their foreign policy. You just want to go government modification, or regime modification, like in Venezuela, and Iran did not accept for that. So this is something that I think if that does not happen in the current deal, we're not going to have a peace agreement. But for me, this is why it's possible now we may have a deal that wasn't possible before the war. The whole intention of this war, in my view, was to have a more friendly regime, to have more influence of the Straits. So that's why I'm more optimistic in this case.
But
Number two,
let me ask you that. I mean, more effort in the Straits. The Straits were open and they'd never been closed.
Not open for America. For the US to be able to choke off the Straits, to choke off China, if they ever need to in the future, in the years from now. If China's planning to attack Taiwan, a great deterrent for the US, like, hey, you attack Taiwan, we're going to close the Straits for you. Plus, having more influence, having more control, investments, access to Iran's oils is a big win as well. So for me, it's a business deal rather than the nuclear weapons, because we all know that Iran is not going to. There was a deal, as you said, there was a deal beforehand. Oman made it clear, European diplomats made it clear. There was a deal beforehand where Iran would give up their enriched uranium, which now we don't know where they are, and would stop their nuclear program and stop the enrichment.
Well, I would counter that we've always had the ability at any time, by just pure policy, to get as much Iranian oil as we wanted by just changing the terms of any kind of sanctions or whatever. So we could have done that at any time without the cause of war. And I guarantee you, at any time we want, we can shut down the Strait of Hormuz if there's a China-Taiwan issue. I think not if Iran,
not if Iran doesn't want to shut. Like, how do we shut it down if Iran doesn't want to shut?
The same way they did. I mean, they would threaten to shoot ships and destroy ships, whatever. We could blockade the thing. No one could get in or out without.
But if we blockade it, can't Iran? Don't we become sitting ducks for Iran? We had to move the aircraft carrier, even further from the coast a couple of weeks ago, because Iran could strike it, and that's Iran after having thousands of targets hit.
No, it's much easier than you think. All we would have to do is launch a few cruise missiles to hit ships once they get into the strait. Just like Iran did. They just said nobody can go through or there's going to be a problem. And most ships didn't try that, only when they were attacked later. We could do the exact same thing. I mean, honestly, it would not be hard at all for us to shut down that strait if we wanted to with any number of assets. You don't need to have a physical blockade. It's not like the Iran can do something that we can't. They have done it one way. We can do it a similar way in our other ways. I promise you, we don't need this to shut down the strait.
Another one would be getting access or control of of Kharg Island and the oil in the country as well. So Iran depends on that oil. If the US companies are the ones that are now controlling that oil, that have access, they've invested in the refineries, etc., as they have done in other countries, as they've done in the Gulf, then that would give more leverage for the US to have control over Iran's oil.
Maybe I missed part of you. So how would America have control of the Iranian oil, whether on Kharg Island?
By having a more friendly regime, similar to the Shah.
And I see a more antagonistic regime of anything that's happened so far. I don't see.
Now it hasn't. I'm not saying it worked. I'm not saying it worked. The strategy has not worked. The regime is stronger. I'm saying what the intention would have been, and what the Americans would be hoping for right now. I think it's failed so far. But the reason I think the only reason a deal could be made right now if the US concedes, which I think they will. The Americans are in a pretty bad spot. But it's more important that the regime accepts a deal as well. Now, there's one argument is that the regime wants to inflict as much damage on Iran wants to inflict as much damage as possible on Israel and the US. the other is that Iran is also struggling. They're being bombed on a daily basis. They want an out. They're having their commanders get struck. The besieged checkpoints, reportedly, they're deserted. People are hiding. The besieged members are hiding because drones are targeting them. So Iran's in a pretty bad spot. But the other point on Israel, though, is this is where it's tricky. So I made a post yesterday. I said, look, if the negotiations are going well, what Iran would do is stop targeting the Gulf, because they want the Gulf on their side. They want to mend relations with the Gulf. They want the Gulf to lobby for a good deal for Iran and target Israel instead, kind of focus all that firepower on Israel and Israeli assets to then force Netanyahu as well to concede and accept a peace deal. So if we see that shift by Iran, would love to get your thoughts. Stop striking the Gulf and American interests, or reduce the attacks there and then focus more on Israel. That could be an indication that there's progress with the Americans, because the Americans are more willing to reach an agreement, and efforts to force Israelis to also agree for concessions. So for me, that's one indicator, which we haven't seen so far. Let's see today how the attacks are going to be, that we may be getting progress in terms of a peace deal. That would include lifting of sanctions. I think that's non-negotiable for Iran. Security guarantees, just there's no way to offer them, as I've said. Reparations kind of so-so. I don't know how they'll structure it. But do you think it's possible that we might see a shift more and focus more on Israel if there is progress when it comes to the negotiations?
Everything is possible, and that's entirely
because Iran can't sustain this forever either, Daniel.
Well, they can't sustain it forever, but I think that they have demonstrated that they can sustain it for a long time. I mean, literally, you had 8 years of the Iran-Iraq war where they were decimated. I mean, their leaders were assassinated. They had bombing throughout their country. I mean, they took a lot of punishment. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed in Iran during that period of time. So I think that they do have a track record that says they can go a lot longer than 4 weeks. We're struggling, and our economy is struggling, especially if nothing happens after 5 days. The oil was right about $100 when Trump made this announcement on Monday, and it dropped down to 80 something, I think, for a while.
Yeah,
it's kind of hovering around that. I think it's still in the.
It's back up there. No, it's back up. It's back up to over 90. Yeah, it's back up early today. So it just shows the markets are showing that it's back up to above 90. The markets are showing exactly. They're showing that. So we're seeing whether the markets believe Trump more or the Iranians more. And today they're leaning more to the Iranian side.
Today, right? But and we still got 5 days, that fifth day, because he just delayed the problem from what would have been Monday night. Now it's moved back 5 days, so we'll see what happens then. Believe me, the markets are certainly going to be watching intently to see what happens. It could either spike up higher or it could even drop lower if something good happens on that fifth day. But I could be wrong here too, and I'm just speculating here. But I cannot imagine that the Iranians, after all that they have endured at the hands of the United States and Israel, and their emphatic claims that they are not just going to keep doing this forever, the fact that they chose not to submit in a big way prior to this war started, even with that good offer here, they still could have submitted more. They didn't. And according to the New York Times, like 2 days, I think, before the war started, they said evidence shows, or reports show, that the Iranians had calculated it would be a greater risk to give in and do whatever Trump wanted and avoid war, as opposed to accepting the war and going forward. Now they took that path. Yeah. They took that path. Then now they have suffered tremendous losses. To now go back and say, we're going to go back to almost a status quo ante, and now we're going to give in something that will bring the war to an end if we just get some kind of minimal thing, with no guarantees, no promises at all that this won't happen again in 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever. It would be foolish. Then they would have paid this huge price for very little. Yeah, they can go back and do it again, but at another tremendous cost. Whereas if they just keep this going on this current path, and saying, hey, we can, because right now, I'll just tell you my view, whatever I'm speculating. This is a test of wills like nothing we've seen in my lifetime. It is between basically Donald Trump, a lot with Netanyahu, but primarily with Trump, because he's the one that has the decision-making power, and the Iranian leadership. Who is going to give in first? Because Iran has to be saying, we can suffer a lot of you, because you have this great military, you have these standoff weapons, all kinds of other missiles and bombs and drones that you can bring on us, and it's causing lots of damage, and we already had a weak economy. But who can say, I can suffer this longer? I argue that the Iranians can suffer longer, because the longer this goes, Iran already is weak. So you're taking them from a weak spot to even more weak, but you're taking the U.S. from way up here where it was pretty good. And now then the longer this goes, especially if that price goes up 120, 150 and stays there, it's going to be catastrophic for us. And so I think the pressure is far more on the United States side than it is on the Iranian side. So it's going to be who can suffer the most, the longest. And I would wager it's probably going to be the Iranians because they have more experience at it.
Yeah, let me give you some reports as well. So one of them here is, according to a former, kind of reaffirms your point. According to CNN, a former Pentagon advisor said Iran is entering negotiations with higher leverage than before the war began. It's exactly what you said. The US spent $12 billion, struck 9,000 targets, and deployed this 82nd Airborne. Iran still controls the Strait of Hormuz and can threaten chaos across the entire region. Now, there's another report here by Yedioth and Al Arabiya. Iran's foreign minister Arachi told US envoy Steve Witkoff that talks are approved from the top. So he claims that the Supreme Leader Moshtaba approved the talks that are ongoing right now behind the scenes. Again, that's not confirmed. This is Yedioth and Al Arabiya. Yeah, and there's another one here. Iran's energy minister says Iran's grid, that's an important point. Iran's grid is decentralized while Israel and Gulf states rely on centralized systems, warning a small number of strikes could cripple their power supply. That's a really important point. The reason I just don't see how it's a good idea in any way for the US to strike the power plants in Iran. They've proven time and time again they can retaliate tit for tat. They've done it with the strike in Dimona as a warning shot when a strike was near the Bushehr plant, very close to the Bushehr power plant, nuclear power plant. So if the power plants are struck in Iran, Iran would do the same in the Gulf. And if they escalate, and Israel, and if they struck Haifa already, and if they escalate and start striking not only the gas field in Qatar, which would destroy the Asian economies, but they could start striking the desalination plants. And that becomes not damaging to the Gulf countries' economies. It would become existential in a way to the Gulf nations when you strike their desalination plants. So I just don't understand how this is a good idea in any way. I also don't understand the position of the Gulf nations, because we're getting reports as well that MBS of Saudi's MBS said he wants Iranian energy infrastructure struck specifically on top of everything else. So he wants the energy infrastructure. Iran already told the world what happens. Gulf energy facilities will be struck. So there's a report here that MBS actually wants the Gulf facilities to be struck. Some even saying MBS wants to join the war, but other Gulf nations are not agreeing with him. So we're seeing a split within the Gulf, and we're seeing a big power struggle there. So everything points at a catastrophe if the US strikes the Iranian energy infrastructure. So my question to you is, if that does happen, if there are no negotiations or the negotiations fail and the US moves forward, what do we see after 4 days?
Yeah, that's my big worry as well. And another reason why I think that the Iranian side is saying we can suck down your missiles. We have a system that's designed to survive that. We have a mentality that can endure suffering for a long time, and we don't think that you can. And you talk about MBS. Now, I'll put a caveat on everything that I hear. There's so much misinformation out there and disinformation and just rumors that are flying around claimed as being true. I don't know if that's accurate or not. What I can tell you is that I doubt that the Iranians are exactly quaking in their boots because the military from Saudi Arabia could launch into operation here. Look what they did for a decade with just against the Houthis. They never brought them to heel, and they didn't exactly show themselves fantastic in military affairs, even in the air in that situation. So I'm not exactly sure that's going to be that big of an issue to add onto it. And then I doubt that it's true, because Saudi Arabia would then know that then they would be at a much higher risk of having targeted strikes from Iran. And they know that Iran can strike the targets with pinpoint accuracy inside of Saudi Arabia, which they've done before, to include that desalination plant. I don't see why they would risk something like that for an opportunity that really won't help them at all, but it would just cause more destruction. So I think we're back to that issue. What's going to happen on that fifth day? Is Trump going to make good on his threat or not? And I think Iran is definitely prepared to respond and retaliate in kind. So far, everything they have said they would do, they have done, especially in regards to what they're going to attack. They've been very transparent about that from the beginning. And they've shown, more importantly, they have the capacity, no matter how many of these 9,000 strikes that we've had and these claims we keep knocking down all of their launchers and all this other kind of stuff. And yet you see they have a pretty sustained rate of fire since I think the 5th or 6th of March. It's been a pretty sustained rate of fire. Then we haven't been able to diminish it, no matter how many targets we have, which gives them confidence that they can continue to endure this. And I think that they're doing a calculation probably by the day, I would imagine that they are, of saying who can suffer the longest. And I think they calculate, and you mentioned a couple of things just a second ago, that they no doubt see that there's more pain pressure points on the Israeli/American side, on Gulf region side, than there are on their side. And I think that they're going to go as far until they can get the deal that they want.
Colonel, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Everyone else, we'll see you again in an hour and a half. Hopefully with someone more optimistic than the Colonel.
Hey, man, I'm just trying to keep it real, man.
Thank you, Colonel. Have a good day, sir.